everybody. I'm Melanie Hamilton, and I'm in denial that I'm aging and I can't read small print. So please forgive me as I squint at my 12-point font in the low light. Thank you. Thank you guys all so much for coming. This series is a part of Writers Reading, which is a reading series we have in addition to the Trias reading series. We still have two great events after this one coming up. Melissa Febo's on November 16th. Yes, I see nods. Either I'm right or no one in the audience knows otherwise. So let's go with November 16th. And this weekend we have nonfiction writers from Iowa Writers Workshop providing a workshop for visiting writers. But tonight, you guys have such a treat. Alleyne is going to be reading. She's a former beloved professor of poetry here at Hobart and William Smith, where she taught performance and political poetry. I know you mourn hearing that. You're like, why don't we still have that? It's mostly because current faculty suck more than Alleyne. But she's back for one night only. Absorb her. She also taught the more standard creative writing curriculum. She earned her master's in writing from Iowa State and also Cornell universities. She's a graduate of Cave Canem, and her work has appeared in Bellevue Literary Review, No Tell Motel, Cimarron, and many other places. And she's currently the director of Furious Flower Arts. And we also learned that 2 days ago, her second collection has been accepted by New Issues Press, and it's called Honeyfish, and I want to read it. But I'm going to talk about her earlier collection, Difficult Fruit, which is available for purchase back there. And eventually I'm going to read a series of beautiful words, and I want you to know that those beautiful words are not mine, but Alleyne's. So when the words start getting beautiful, you know it's no longer me, it's her. The thing that strikes the reader about Difficult Fruit, Alleyne's 2014 collection of poems, is the way the poems accrue. The poems catalog monumental losses and losses which seem more familiar. They mourn the everyday passing and the not-to-be-born injustices that plague our time. But as the collection progresses, these losses begin to fruit, find exquisite moments of intimacy and beauty. It's a funked-up beauty, a skin-slick dream banquet beauty, a hive of humming boulder beauty, blessing brick, mortar, ruin, Christ bride beauty. A beauty white with worry, a beauty of meaningless arias and ghost voices and irregular beats. As the collection gathers, it makes its own argument for the consolation of all this loss it explores. Inadequate and difficult, perhaps, but not without significance. And as Lauren reads, if you listen hard, that consolation will open itself up to you as well. Please join me in welcoming Alleyne tonight.
So you've also just met my newest ghostwriter. Thank you so much, Molly, for that introduction, and thank you all for having me back. It's so wonderfully eerie to be here and to see all these familiar faces that we were discussing. Like, it's been, 7 years since I left, and yet there's Facebook. So I feel like I also had coffee with these people last week. But in any event, I'm really happy to be here and to read from Difficult Fruit. So I like to say in the beginning, I preface the book by calling it Difficult Fruit because it's got some sadness in it. So feel warned. My mom is like, why are you unhappy? I'm like, I'm fine, I promise. But I write that way. And I also want to say that so much of this book happened here and in this place and with people who were wonderful and supportive, and so thank you for helping this book in all its, whatever it is, come to fruition. So I'm going to start at the beginning because I am a bad person and didn't plan an order. Actually, it's not because I'm a bad person. I mean, it's a little bit, there's a convenience behind it as well. I took a workshop, gosh, back in 2008, so I was still here, with A. Van Jordan, who's an amazing poet, who said there's at least 3 books in every book. And what you look for is the movement of the poem, so that idea of accrual. I wish I could take credit for it. The order I submitted to my editor, he was like, yeah, no. So how about this? And I was just like, oh, that's doing something else, but I like it, right? And so the idea of seeing what else was in the book has always been really interesting to me, so that's what I did with readings. And sort of let the place tell me where I should start and where I go from there. And my favorite story about how that worked out is I was at Southern Indiana University, and just at this moment, the fire alarm went off, and we had to leave the building. And so I was just like, okay, I'm reading poems with fire. There is a lot of fire in this book. I had no idea until I decided to do that. So I asked earlier if there were any request poems, and I heard some of you were a fan of the first poem in the book, which I don't think I've ever read. So again, something new at HWS. Ask no questions. Love, the door inside me is locked, and the bones are begging to be let loose with their drums and handbells, with their tales of the sea at sunrise. I confess to the carrying of secrets. I confess to bearing songs not meant for your tongue. Some longings are too heavy to move, others too spiked to cling to. Leave the unused to their dusty sleep. I've learned to live well enough without them. Let me wring my occasional tears and stare from time to time into corners in which you see no incense. Let me unbury my gods in secret and rebind to them my prayers, my necessary guilt. Let me believe my happiness complete, this body with your name on its gate, this deaf heart that burns and shines and keeps on turning the key. So that's where Difficult Fruit begins. The elevator pitch that I was forced to come up with by my publisher was like, you have to be able to say what it is in 2 sentences. And I describe it then as a book about a woman making her way through the world and making the world as she makes her way. And so thinking about how that relationship to self and world is definitely something I try to do throughout here. And because the world is such a jacked up place, sometimes I also can blame it for some of the darkness in the book, but I also think the world is a beautiful place, and that's part of the book as well. This poem, again, tries to wrestle with that. It's called If Sky. Wish for a working machine, and you're given a body. Ask for options, and you get a life with no roadmap and free will. Say, give me a reason, and what you get is silence or wars continents too far away to care without exertion. If you say yes to knowing, dispossession flowers in you and cleaves to your progeny for centuries. If you wish to forget, there are pills with mild side effects, dreams that grab you by the throat, and pockets of fear that separate you from your skin. If you sing hymns, the gods of memory might waken and strike you with elegies for your unguarded heart. Ask for love, and the sky will unveil itself, layer by layer, its naked blue flame wanting only your blindness in return. So, one of the things that happened, again also in 2008, is I got accepted to a residency in New York. I guess we're in New York at Yale. And as I was packing, my First Communion album fell out of nowhere onto my head. And because I'm a weirdo, I was like, this means something. And I took it with me. When I was there, I was unpacking. I kind of forgot I did that. I was like, oh, here you are again. And I looked at pictures of myself having First Communion, and it was so interesting to see like my face, still my face, but not really my face. And I wrote a poem to one picture in particular. I was like, what am I even thinking in this moment? And that became the beginning of a series that really is the backbone of the book, in which I write letters to myself at different ages. It's kind of, my running joke. If you talk to yourself, you get committed. If you write to yourself, you get published. So it's worth trying. But it was these letters to myself go through. So this is that first poem, 7. In this picture, your dress is burning white. Your veil engulfs your head like lacy flames. Your Snoopy watch flares red on your wrist. You clutch your white handbag like a wish. Little Christ bride, you are innocence embodied down to your white knee socks, Mary Janes, and unpierced ears. Your parents are stiff with pride, their afros not yet streaked white with worry. Behind you, your godmothers hold fast to their vows and your shoulders. Nanny George alive and beaming, Auntie Patsy whispering into your ear, real as the statue of Mary in the background. Everything in this moment is true, but even truth is not impervious to time, and we lose so much. Even this day's memory will thin and disappear, but you already sense this. The anticipation already giving way to something else you cannot name, as you solemnly wait to be captured, bending your smile into the camera's light. So that's what I thought I was thinking, who knows. I'm gonna read 14, which I feel bound to say is my favorite poem, but not because it is my favorite poem, but because I read with Jamaica Kincaid, and she was supposed, I read my poem, she's gonna read her stuff, and after I read, she pulls my book out of her bag and said, I'm so glad you didn't read my favorite poem, and proceeded to read her favorite. I say Jamaica Kincaid has a favorite Lorna Rae, but clearly it's not my favorite poem. So this is our favorite poem. I've just claimed that forever. My friend had the presence of mind to video. My face is amazing. I'm like, is this happening right now? I'm so excited. But this is one of the early ones as well within this series of age poems. And all I ask is people to remember 14, all you want to do is be grown, and that's all you want. 14. How the bud yearns to flower, believing that bloom is all beauty, perfuming the bliss of pluck. How she knows nothing of uprooting, the constraints of glass, the burden of perpetual brightening. When she blossoms in her dreams, she is only the full rose of herself, free at last from the inconvenient root. How she strains against her greenness, prays for the day a hand will lift her away, oh rose. Let us not tell her of wither. Let her turn her best face to the sky. So, like I said, the poems kind of go between those way more personal into kind of trying to connect to the larger world. And one of the turning points of that, I think, is the long poem 18, which I've steeled myself ever since I published this book to read every time I'm on a college campus. Especially when you go to the bathroom and you see, what is consent? And because it references an assault that happened in my freshman year of college, and it took 10 sonnets and 10 years and stuff to make that process. So I like to share it and see if I can preemptively assist anybody who winds up in this situation. 18. Oh, also the book, The Rape Poems by Frances Driscoll is a must-read. Everybody should read that book. It's an amazing book. And actually, I read that book years and years ago before I even started this poem, and I carried it around with me, and I think it was really wonderfully supportive in helping me produce this poem. Actually, when I was writing this, I surrounded myself with the poetry of badass women. So I had like my Sharon Olds book and my Kim Adonisia book and like Jan B.A.D. and I was just like, okay, ladies, we can do this. And then we didn't, but we kept trying. 18. With thanks to Francis Driscoll for the word. Tonight, you are full of small rivers. Your eyes' salty runoff, the rust-bright trickle staining your thigh, the unnameable, undammed flooding in your chest, you are drowning in all of them. Sweet girl, of course you do not have the words. It will take you almost 10 years to find them. They are both more powerful and less useful than you can believe in this night when your hands and faith have failed you, when your mouth is an absence of screams. Some rivers are wider than any courage. I give you nothing as you sink alone under those waters. This is how I am born. Under those waters you labor to birth me. For days you are dead to alarms, knocks, rings, messages with their battery of concern and questions you have no answer for. You have made yourself impenetrable to insistence with sleep's shadowy armor, with a silence that consumes all sound whole. You are beyond the world's reach, which is one kind of safety. I can only imagine that bodiless place, its darkness like a sweetness in the mouth. The secrets you learned there delivered me, your miracle scream, your dark voice. Together we left that realm of smoke, returned to this country of blood, awoke. You wake up, but you can never return. No matter what country you burden with dreams of home, if there are rivers, if blood or tears or time flow there, if memory lives or is buried there, if leaving was your own doing, if you were captured or borrowed or lost, if the doors were cast wide or if you pried them open, if there are windows or doorways, your name is not a key. Return has no means in any language, no lines around it on any map. To go back is a verb conjugated in dreams that dissolves on your tongue when you wake up reaching for it. You seek a different debt. Choose a different peace. Your verb to forget. And you forgot. You moved through your days easy with lightness that was not untrue. You lifted weights and danced, you biked and ran. You moved and moved, never still long enough for your shadow to settle. You visited familiar countries, not quite the same as returning, made home the body's wild contours. You wore short skirts and spiky heels. You held bottles to your mouth, sparked fire to your face, learned to suck the smoke in and feel it swirling there next to your heart. You defied sleep, worked the late shift at bars instead of dreaming. You kept your eyes open, your gaze fixed on the slippery horizon. Oh, slippery horizon, seeming fixed just within reach is your most perfect trick. You keep us going by it, hang your dazzle like the perfect carrot we chomp and chomp towards you. When you're bright enough, we need never look behind. Who wants to reach back when the future beckons, a kept promise? 18, you know everything is at stake, your possible life, hopes of making good you long to realize, some nagging truth, your sanity, pride. It is not a choice, this horizon, but a bearable path. We have faith in the signs saying, this way to happiness, you are closer each day. You believe happiness is the bearable vision of yourself. The woman who lives certain in her skin, the woman who walks unafraid, whose throat out-thunders thunder. Every day she unwinds the bright rope of her will, harnesses the hours for her pleasure. Her laughter is an open door. Happy her heart empty of longing. Happy is her dreamless and unvisited sleep. She is a bullet, a bird, all things swift and light that ride on wind. She will not turn. She will answer to no name but her own. She is entire. She makes herself wide so nothing can hold her. She holds all inside. We hold all 18, but not everything dies because we believe burial and end. Something waits to make gardens of us, to wreath us with quiet thorns. It grows fat and bursts its skin in us, thrives on our rivers. It waits in our dark. It sets down roots, long fingers probing the earth of us. It breaks free and breathes the air of us. It reaches for our light. 18, it creeps along our paths. It thickens, it clings. Inside our bodies, something always waits to disappear, to burn, or to startle us with bloom. It unfolds obscene flowers. A doom of petals litters us, our breath, their fragrance heavy, bitter. For years, they scent our daily air, heavy. Breath after breath, we press on. The story ripening in us, its eyes looking through ours in the mirror. We have not seen our face without its shadow for almost 10 years. And now this. In a class on violence against women, the professor prophesies this moment. It will come for anyone who has suffered trauma. We do not believe we are anyone until we are sobbing for the night the boy you liked held you down and made you bleed. Again, the rivers, but this time I come bearing a word, rape. We cling to the raft of it, begin our escape. In the raft of language, we begin our escape. We hold ourselves tightly inside it, whisper its single syllable like a spell. The word means it was not your fault for liking him, for kissing him, for leaning into the touch he pressed against your shoulders, despite your desire, despite the first thrill. The word means you said no too, and that matters. The word tells us you were not being punished by God. The word means you were not weak, not stupid, not damned. You were a victim, not a tease, not a cautionary tale or a moral. This is what a word can give: definition, meaning, the closest we get to salvation. Meaning is the closest we get to salvation, which is to say, the word changes nothing. It does not unmake the rivers, cannot erase them from the landscape of us. Spells have their limits, which is to say, return means too late to be saved in any language. The longing is to be pure, but what you get is to be changed. 18, we will carry our dark. We will birth ourselves again and again. We will tend our gardens, harvest the difficult fruit. We will apprentice ourselves to the work and learn the language that will allow us to summon our own angels. We survive. We go on. We cross those rivers. We live. Okay, I'm going to drink water now. I'm just saying, that's my longer Me Too. Just saying. Hashtags weren't a thing when I wrote that. Okay, so this is the moment where I try to find like those lighter poems for a second. And I did work on this poem here. You guys, I don't know if you'll remember, there's no reason you would, but I went to another writing residency where there were 4 women and 2 men, and then on movie night, somehow we wound up watching Rambo 5. And so to reclaim that hour of my life, I was taking notes while we were watching the movie and sort of had some fun writing letters, which became again a thing throughout this book. And these are letters to John Rambo. At least you know who Rambo is. That makes me happy. Okay. 1. Dear Rambo, after all these years, you're back. The muscles on your forearm bulging as ever, the asymmetry of your face, its trademark scowl, the rusty grate of your voice reminding us you're a man who understands words don't matter if you speak kick-ass. 2. Dear Rambo, you've seen it all. The way the body empties like an ice tray, the bullet's kiss so clean it could break your heart, The crimson fountain a wound makes, wondrous in its puncture and spurt. Beautiful, wouldn't you say? 3. Dear Rambo, you've pushed your own body past the recognizable limits, the machine of your fist and eyes sleek and practiced, ready to fire on command. I know a man who died from cellular mutiny, the cancer conquering organ after organ until every cell turned renegade, ignored the ceasefire he cried out in his sleep. You must never worry about such things. 4. Dear Rambo, if I ever paint you, it would be clay on canvas. I'd put a fence in the center right where your heart would be. I'd sketch your face and cover it with sand. You'd be invisible. I bet you'd like that. And add something to your portrait every couple years, so rest assured there'll always be a sequel. 5. Dear Rambo, I am so jealous of your metabolism. I bet you never have to count calories and drink as much whiskey as you want. 6. Dear Rambo, the last time I saw you, I must have been 10. You were hot then, but now my heart is well behaved and does not even twitch at the sight of you. I assume this means one of us has grown too old. 7. Dear John, we've known each other our whole lives. I know nothing phases you. Tomorrow I will be 29, and frankly, John, I'm scared. Tell me, what is the secret of fearlessness? John, also thank you for your suspension of disbelief. I'm clearly going to be 29 tomorrow. What's my timing like? I forgot to look at when I started. Okay. I'm going to read maybe a couple more, and then I'm going to inaugurate book 2 with y'all and read some poems from that because that's exciting. I would be remiss in, I think I'll read this one. Melanie and I were talking earlier about teaching in jail, and she is amazing and teaches like the high security dudes. I am not. I said, I'll teach the girls, juveniles. Yes, no Orange is the New Black for me. And one of the things that happened, so I was at Cornell and I had a writing exercise, and this girl was writing, right? I mean, these stories here, and this came out of it, but it's sort of simultaneously super fulfilling and super sobering to work in that environment. This poem, again, a letter. Dear Autumn, this poem, too late, remembers you. You're the new girl, body turned away from the circle, foot scuffing the floor. You don't want to belong, and who can blame you? They're a ragged bunch, the girls at the center, sullen, spaced out, or screaming in corners until the uniforms come to shake the sound out or muffle it with the rattle of pills. But for an hour each week, I come with my handouts and books. We huddle over puzzles, sonnets, haiku, then tensed over your pencils, you're supposed to write your own words. I'm here, you write, because they want me to tell them what he did. But I'm not reading this yet. I'm just watching how your face seems so young and so weary, your eyes between flicker and fade as you scribble into the notebook you won't be allowed to keep. I think poetry can save you, but you're not interested in poems. Your reality demands answers. It's true, he touched me, but I don't want him to go to jail. He's a good person, he just needs help. Miss Lauren, you write, what should I do? Your careful penmanship loops and curves across the page, its literal plea defying the break of stanzas, meter, or line. Home at my desk, I discard note after futile note. Dear Autumn, you are brave and beautiful. Dear Autumn, no one deserves. The world is unjust, dear Autumn. Just have faith. Dear Autumn, this poem, dear Autumn, I never get it right. I'm gonna leave this book with reading, God, I just said this book like it's real, there's another book now. Ah. I was telling him I found out 2 days ago, so it's really new. And also I sent it in 6 weeks before that, so I really was not expecting any phone calls anytime soon. This one is a poem for Trayvon Martin, and it is actually, unfortunately, sadly, whatever, one of the things that runs between this book and the next book. I do, again, keep trying. I don't think it's something I'll ever stop doing, making that connection between the experience of self and the wider world. And this, again, during the Trayvon Martin, you know, the hoodie was the thing, and I felt like in some ways it was almost flattening out the boy, and I thought, how could I give back dimension? I was like, you know, again, it's like, I'm a poet, what can I do? And it's like, you know, our tools are symbols. Our tools include, you know, language and metaphor and all these things, so I wanted to try to use the devices of the poem to rebuild the boy. The hoodie stands witness for Trayvon Martin. I was built for bodies like his, between boy and man, sauntering in angles he couldn't hold but swung his limbs from, careful, cool in every step. I can tell you the story of him, unexceptional. He put change and candy into my pockets, the necessary jangle of keys and cell phone hushed in the sock of me. I watched him from the soft pile he made of me on the floor of his messy adolescent room where I lay beside his sneakers and backpack. He did his homework with chat windows open. White headphones hooked him into some steady beat. That day, he was thinking of nothing in particular. He was quiet in his skin, tucked into the shade of me. He was an easy embrace, until an old ancestral fear lay its white shadow across us like an omen. I can tell you his many hairs raised in warning beneath me. His armpits funked me up with terror. His saunter slipped into a child's unsteady totter under the weight of a history staggering behind him, mad with its own power. He clung to me then, wholly unmanned, a baby clutching his blankie. He pulled me close, and I stroked his head, caressed the naps he had brushed to waves that morning. I felt him brace his bones beneath me, his heart 1,000 beating drums. The bullet ripped through us like a bolt of metal lightning. His blood, losing its purpose, ran into me, and I wished we were truly a single body, that I could have held its rush and flow like a second sweaty skin. I can tell you how his spirit slipped out, like steam from cooling water, slowly, fading by degrees, until he stilled. And so back to the idea of what do you do as a poet? I wrote that poem just in sort of all of the hubbub, and I go to a lot of writing residencies. I'm realizing it's a theme. I was at a writing residency in Provincetown when the verdict came out declaring George Zimmerman not guilty. And the second book actually opens with poetry workshop after the verdict for Trayvon. Morning lights your 4 windows and you wake. It is already another day. You stumble, befuddled, into the bathroom, so white it's like you're inside the moon. You look in the mirror, then turn away. Better to just leave. Get your body out the door and into the blue day. You follow the brown sparrow, maybe, perched outside on the rail like a guide. Bring everything already packed inside your skin. A dead brown boy and his free killer, his judge and jury of women, the 6 not guilty bells clanging again and again in your weary ear. No, that's your alarm. It's time to be a poet. You bring your pen and notebook, your poet's eye. You try to follow instructions. Write what you see. It's simple. You walk down the road, safe in your pack of poets, women, white. You do not write this in your notebook. Instead, your eyes find and follow the lines that run everywhere, across the street, up the railings, across windows and shutters, siding, shingled roofs, parsing the landscape into cells. Your white journal pages, ruled. You write down all the signs, closed, Peter's property management, not for public use. These dunes aren't made for walking. Stop. But you cannot stop. You follow the wind, ripe with salt and already sweaty bodies. You see a pile of beached boats lumped like bodies in a mass grave, a stone wall drowning while sleepy dories drift by, sun-beached stumps slowly going to rot. You see the sun marking time as it slips higher and higher, the day stretching overhead, last night's memory already dark. You see an American flag, and below it, the reddening back of a white boy lying face down on the sand, his body the opposite of a chalk outline. You write, the light skitters brilliantly atop the bay's piercing blue. You write, a boy, his light hair lightening to gold, his body so still, still breathing. You write, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Okay, so I'm still learning where things are in this book. I'm in another P-Town poem. So again, this was a workshop for a week, and we were supposed to like sit and look at things and write. So there's an odd fish, but it's a weather vane because it's P-Town to the fish, but then also it's like, so anyway, I wrote some poems to the fish as weather vane, and this is an elegy for the fish as weather vane. You were meant for a different blue. You, cod, mackerel, trout, or just idea of fish, hoisted up, spiked through the center to test, of all things, air. Beached in sky, sun-beaten, tarnished, a shred of cloud caught in your grasping mouth. You're turning an illusion of motion so close to the one for which you were born. No schools for you there, in that lonely, elevated place, only its perpetual piercing. You, alien among birds with your useless gills, useless fins. Caught, darling, trophy. You were stranded so close to God, and you spin in the place where prayers rise, where dreams of home take wind and take hold of you, like hooks yanking you, now this way, now that. And then if I can find it, there's an elegy, an ode. Y'all know while I talk, you'll know what the ode is? Ode, what's an ode? I'm still a teacher. What's an ode? Anybody? Somebody? Help me while I find this poem. Yeah, what next? Was there a taker? No? So the ode is a celebration poem, and there's like one in difficult fruit, and it's really a fun form because you get to look at something that's really weird. And in the first book, it's my belly, which is not something I tend to praise, but it was a good challenge. And so having written the elegy to the fish as weather vane, I hope I can read you the ode to the fish as weather vane. And so the first one was sort of like it's out of place, and this one hopefully recaptures the narrative. Ode to the fish as weather vane. You were built for a different blue, for oceans, rivers, clear complexes of glass, but here you are, hoisted among the clouds, neighbor to the stars, your fins redefining wings. Say flight. Say sky is ocean by another name. Say biology is one order of being, but imagination is another. How you undo cliché with your unlikely grace. Slip through the clumsy nets limits would knit around your bizarre existence. Token, they whisper, freak. But how you withstand the fickle transformations of weather, read the revolution wind scripts onto your body, learn to move in its midst. Say evolve. Say the first order of being is survival. Say these gills will become lungs and testify. Say thrive in any element, and name it possible. And so I go back to difficult fruit to close because I still want to leave you with this. Thank you guys so much for having me and for being my first readers for Honeyfish. This is another letter, and it's to you. Letter to the outside. And I was at another writing residency. It's a thing. It's magic here, outside the rule of clocks and scurry. The vast baskets of mountains overflow, the clouds clink like ice in a glass. I drink it all in, and it is enough. What a concept, contentment. Yesterday, where the creek tipples at the base of the valley, I saw a dead goat, stiff, ringed with flies, its face like a plate of leftovers. I wept, then I did not. I stood at the roadside until the wind wafted up its benediction. From this place, I give to you the unoccupied air, the wobbly prancing of new calves, a sky so close the stars might be a chain link fence you run your hands along as you amble through the night, your live and mutable body, its spark and spell and solitude. Right back. Thank you. I take questions now. Sure.
I was wondering, like, how do you go about ranking poems that are best utilized?
Did that come out?
Yeah.
It is, I want to say, the most torturous part of putting a manuscript together for me. I think that, okay, first place goes to the poems themselves. I'm making them, but I think second place is definitely ordering. I have done once, and maybe so now twice, right? So what I do is I try to see how the poems speak to each other in ways that are more imaginative than how they are in my head, which is I wrote this first, and then I wrote this one, and then I write. So chronology is interesting to nobody but yourself. And so what I try to do is let and this does not work, it just makes for a really weird mix, but it's a thing. The last line of one poem kind of dictate what the next poem is going to be until I get to a point where there is no continuation, and then that's a section. So this is not a sophisticated methodology, it's just what I have come up with. And so, but I will say that for the first book, one of the things, I had a carrel, and I cut the poems out so I could literally kind of see them in a different way, and I put them up on the walls and kind of would just pace. And like, you know, if they're looking at you, you have to make them better because they're looking at you. So I'm like, oh, you know, so I was doing that. And then just getting a sense with literally changing the perspective, like where some things were recurring. And so trying to decide, okay, do I want to put all, I mean, I don't know that there's a method. Like, right, you put all the things that are similar together, but it's like, is that weird? Do you spread them out? So this book has gone out as actually, which was what I was doing with the other one, in like several different permutations of itself. Because again, like Leanne said, which then made me feel better, there's just multiple books in a book. And it really depends on how, right, it's almost like putting a poem together, right? The words you put next to each other do something. And so it changes, and then somebody likes one, and then it's done. And then you have an editor who says, actually, you're wrong, and change it, and you can do that too. So I don't have a secret. I just really want my friends to do it for me. What kind of sandwich is this? Please tell me.
So I'm wondering about the relationship between this difficult fruit and honeyfish. How do you think of them as relating to each other?
Okay, I don't. At the point that I sent this out, my friend, I called her and I was like, this is happening. And she said, didn't you send me an email that said I did a thing? This is literally, I said, I did a thing, here's the thing. And I sent her the email with the manuscript. So I have not yet begun to think about what the book is or what it's doing. I'm doing other work, and I had been working on it. And then I thought, you know, I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens, and that way I'll feel like I'm working on my poetry. Yeah. So that said, I was really, so a bunch of things. I remember when I was thinking as I was reading to you, like I sound a little like, oh, I was trying to do this. I didn't know I was trying to do any of that actually until way after the poems in Difficult Fruit, right? Like you just write the poem, you don't really have an agenda, at least I didn't. And then sort of, one of the things nobody told me about writing a book is that your book can teach you. I was just like, when you read something over and over again, it's like reading, I'm like, oh, I think this is what I was trying to do. So I learned in some ways a lot from Difficult Fruit, and I imagine Honeyfish will teach me in the same way. But there is overlap, and again, in the sense of, for me, I know just even based on classes that I had political poetry, I'm interested in what it means to be somebody who is not a lawyer, not a police officer, not a judge, and still be able to be effective in social justice, in how to make the world a more equitable and just place. And I'm like, God, really, could I have been, I could do, there are no poets without borders. Like, what are you gonna do, sonnet somebody to save their life? Like, you can't do that, right? So I'm always wrestling with that, and I think that's always gonna be in the books. Like, how do I participate in a narrative that is outside myself, but also understand through looking at myself how I present and participate in that larger narrative too, right? So Hillary Clinton came to Dubuque. One of the joys of living in Iowa is that everybody comes to Iowa. And so, I got to ask her a question, and I was just like, okay, I am a Black woman, immigrant, of color, like, what are you gonna do for me? She's just like, whoa. I was just like, yeah, right, welcome to my life. So again, even just thinking about the I in a poem in that way, gives me a way of entering a bigger narrative. So I think that's one of the things they have in common. The rest of it, I have no idea.
Yeah. I was just wondering if there's maybe, or if there has been a point in your life where you would say, okay, this is the starting point of where I write poetry, and if you have decided that, or how did you decide that poetry is your genre, or is it even your genre? Have you decided on that?
So when I decided to be a poet, and why poetry?
Yeah.
That's an interesting origin question, right? So on the one hand, I'm from Trinidad. I came to the States to study radiologic science and nuclear medical technology in college. Clearly not poetic. That said, I was also a weirdo in my science class. I literally remember my physics teacher being like, Lauren, Alleyne, did you bring Hamlet into my laboratory? And I was like, sorry, miss, right? So, like, I'd always been a reader, I'd always been a writer. I was a science kid who did literature as part of, I grew up with a system, right? So for A-levels, I did, like, physics and literature. So when did that start? My sister sings calypso, I wrote them for her, I was like 10. Like, I didn't think that was poetic. Again, people who do things like that in Trinidad also have real jobs, right? So again, the idea that you could be a poet was not a thing for me until college. And even then, I had such guilt. My parents sold things to send me to America, and then I was like, so about that radiology, changing my major in English, bye, But it was, I had two moments, and one was going to, again, radiology, we were going to do 2 years of gen ed in the university, and then 2 years in the hospital with, like, lots of things, and I went to the orientation, and I was just like, I cannot. And I left. And then, sort of along that time, around that time, this teacher I'd take, Brother Edward Wesley, I love him, and he's like, I didn't do anything. I was like, no, dude, really. I took all of his classes, and he said, what are you doing with this radiology business? You were meant to be educated, not trained. And I was like, I don't even know what you mean by that. But it was like a moment where I stopped, like, what am I doing? It also might have precipitated me running out of the hospital. So those are moments where I was like, okay, I don't know what one does with a BA in English, as the song goes, but I'm just going to do it and figure it out. I took my advisor from Iowa State, Mary Swanner, to Trinidad with me once, and she told me this story about 2 years ago that I had no idea happened. She's like, your mother, storyteller, right? She's like, your mother is ironing a shirt, and like the iron is steaming, and she's like, so, Mary, I sent Lauren to America to be a doctor. She comes back and she's a poet. She's like, the iron is falling. what is she gonna do with that? And she was just like, oh my God, I better advise her well. I was like, oh, sorry. So, you know, I just really sort of made it up, right, Lucille Clifton style. And then the other question about poetry being the genre, like I really try, I was talking about this earlier, I try to write other things, I really do. But they just keep going. Yeah, my sister really wants me to write a novel so that she can actually read it. And then my mom's reaction is wonderful. She's like, oh, so this is what you've been working on all this time. So I'm going to write a fat novel, like a big one. But so far, I have not found whatever the fiction writers have that makes that happen. Even my essays, I do write essays, but they be short. So I think it's a little bit about compression and that musicality that's really intriguing to me. I think it's mysterious, and I like that. It's my displaced Catholicism, maybe, I don't know. Like not quite knowing what's happening, the little element of mystery in something that's supposed to be ordinary, right? Your bread becomes, you know, mystical, and your language becomes a poem. So that's, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you strike kind of a balance of tones that's on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. You go from like really funny and light and playful to really dark and serious and like commanding of the audience's full attention. Like, how do you go about setting this balance? Is there any point in your writing where you kind of say like, whoa, this is like too funny to play with the serious stuff, or this is too serious to play with the serious stuff?
No. And I say that because when I don't write books, I mean, that's the thing, right? I write poems, like I just write, and then like after a while, I'm like, oh, I'm not writing poems, let me see what I have been up to, and I'll go figure it out. And I think that, let's see, I'm glad to hear that you think some things are funny. There's not a lot of humor in my sense. I tell everybody I have a terrible sense of humor. Just nothing is funny. I'm like, really, that's not funny. That hurt. Somebody got hurt with that hammer that got, you know, in the cartoon, right? Like, it's not funny. But I do think that, again, that's something the poems have taught me. Like reading them over and over and over and over in different ways has sort of shown me some of the tonal possibilities of the poems, where in my head I'm sort of always like, you know, the moment of the poem for me is usually urgent. I never feel like, I'm feeling light, let me go write a poem. That has never happened. But, so, right? But, so it kind of goes to something serious, but then in, I think, my voice or something, and I find those moments, and then some wise editor or reader friend will say, hey, these could go together in this way. But also, like, you know, even with Honeyfish, I'm surprised with this version. I gave the one that I sent to Sam, the one I did a thing, and she's just like, dang, like, you know, I read those first couple poems, and she says, like, Lauren, there's like a pile up of bodies in that first section, like, I couldn't go on. I was like, sorry. Again, that's an arrangement question, right? Like, and so then the next version that I did, I tried to, like, spread the bodies out a little bit. I don't know if that's a better thing, and then somebody liked the pile up, so I don't know. Maybe nobody described it to them quite in that way, but I think there's always, this is the thing I trust, right, that you're writing all of the poems, and so there's something of you in all of them, in the way that you are a person who laughs and cries sometime, and could be that person, right, very Whitman-esque, contain your multitudes. Or as a poet I recently interviewed, Dinesh Smith said, he's like, I'm like Whitman, I contain a what is it, a host of motherfuckers who crazy. It was like, all right. So, you know, let your crazy mofos go and just accept them, and then see how they're working together to make one complete person or poem.
You read a couple of poems that are kind of in the form of a letter or addressed to somebody, and I'm just curious what you like about that form or why you chose that.
What do I like about the letter form? Again, it sort of started as a letter to myself, so it's like a lyric in the most sort of, you know, sort of like, oh, it's the I, but it's not really the I. But then the letters sort of started going other directions. I don't know. I think part of it is why I like letters in general is like, the other person doesn't get to answer. You get to say all the things, then you can talk, right? So there is that. I know, it's mean. But that's what I liked about the hard letters, right? Of like back in the day when I just came to the States, and that's what I was sending to my family and whatnot. So I think there's that. But for me, I love the, I don't really know what I'm thinking until I'm writing. And so thinking about any letter, right? You start off a letter to somebody, you sort of wind up all over the place. And I liked that, bringing that associative freedom to the poem, or maybe, kind of masking it a little bit. But I also like the idea of an audience, right? That you're always in conversation with, I think the lyric poem sort of masks that. Actually, I just had an argument with Jonathan Culler about that. But the lyric seems to be addressing no one and from no one. It's sort of everywhere. And I'm like, no, you're always talking to someone, even if it is an imagined, even if it is your God, even if it is yourself. And so sort of making that foregrounded, I think, is interesting. And again, I want to point out, this is one of the things I love about questions, because I don't think I was thinking that while I wrote the letters, like, I would like to have a conversation with myself because of this lyric interest. No, I just wrote the letters. But then when I have had to speak about them and think about them, I think that's maybe what I was trying to do, or what I like about it.
Yeah. Do you think that your poetry has the sounds of Trinidadian English as opposed to American English?
I think that's something that I wrestle with. My press is Peepal Press for the first book, and they do Black and Black British and Caribbean, and I was like, am I Caribbean enough for you? I'm sorry, it's not in dialect. And I think there's a few things. What I will claim from Trinidad is my love of story. Most of these poems are narrative, and I think the collection sort of tries, maybe not an overt story, and also I think the political aspect of them. I have these memories, of my mom and the neighbors sort of leaning out and just talking politics, right? And then Calypso, not the Harry Belafonte stuff, but Calypso as in Trinidad is social commentary, right? It's what the Calypso does. It chastises the politicians, it talks about taxes, and so that a poem does that was never a question for me. Again, I wrote Calypso. So I think that's the part that I would claim is very Trini. I do think there's a musicality. I think sometimes my accent comes out, but one of the things I'll say is I was in Trinidad at the time when we were still doing O-levels and A-levels, right? So I didn't read as many Caribbean authors as I read, Henry V and T.S. Eliot and whatnot. So I do think that and also we didn't write in the dialect ever, right? I went to good schools, so they corrected our English, all the Queen's English. And so I do think for me, the sense of whenever I try to write in that, it feels inauthentic because I've been well trained out of that for a long, long time. But I also think I'm trying a little bit to go back to that. I took a lot of those out of the second collection, but I've been reading a lot of Caribbean stuff. Recently, I'm actually trying to do a PhD that will focus on Caribbean writing. So that I think has, and I have an essay that may or may not get written called Reading My Way Home, and just reading these Caribbean writers, because what I'm finding is, oh my God, if I'd been reading this stuff, I know I would be a different writer, but I wasn't. So I'm interested in seeing what it will do as I'm taking it in now. It's been a 3-year project so far. I'm just having so much fun reading that. Yeah. Oh, hi, Jenny.
Hi, Mother. I was just wondering how your background in the fact that you are from where you are helps inform what you do now. The fact that you are from Trinidad and not in...
And that my mother was a teacher for 35 years, and I said it would never happen to me, and yet here I am.
And that you are.
Like that.
That you come from Trinidad and that you are an immigrant, and especially seeing where we are here now in the universe, and how that informs what you're doing now and going forward.
Yeah, again, I think that's a question I'm always wrestling with, what can it mean? I have friends, and we just WhatsApp technology, right? We have a WhatsApp group from my posse from high school, and we're a vet, an optician, a philosopher, and then there's me, and so it's all of us are in these spaces that aren't Trinidad. Well, some of us are, and are, what's the word I want to say, actualizing our past and dreams or whatever in different ways. And so, but I would say as a writer, I think what it's forcing me to do to kind of get back to that is to just always locate myself in the moment, but also to insist on my presence in the moment. I think there's a move for erasure that's happening. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm here, sorry. And you're gonna have to listen to me because I'm gonna talk and keep talking. So I think that the move towards silencing, right now in my role, I'm the assistant director of a poetry center that focuses on African American poetry and poetics. And so I came up with a tagline for us. It's so great: celebrate, educate, and preserve. No, wait, not preserve, we changed it. Hold on. Education, celebration, preservation. And so those are the things that I'm working on right now, like trying to get people to teach African American and Black poets in the classroom. So we do all sorts of seminars around that. So I feel like I've actually also found an institution where I'm able to activate what I do and love, which is poetry, with like that larger conversation. You know, we have an archive, we go out into the schools, we have a reading series. So like I'm doing things like that that help me to ground myself, but also to use poetry in ways that I think, like I said, can move us to more equitable, just, and inclusive future.
All right, well, thank you everyone so much for coming. Alleyne,